Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Cupid's Coach podcast. I'm your host, Julie Ferman, inviting you, as always, to transform me to we through the process of doing dating better. Today's a really cool day, guys, because guess who I have as a guest? You won't believe it. You would never guess it. All right. He's the guy who's responsible for Gil and I being married. He's the guy who's responsible for me being in this industry. He's the one responsible for the fact that this podcast even exists because you're the grandpappy of my life in the dating industry. Jeffrey Ullman, thank you for being on my show.
Hey, pleasure. I hope you don't mind me drinking on the job. I
You can do
mean,
whatever you want.
first of all, it's not a job, and I'm blurring out my little water container.
Well, Jeffrey Ullman is the guy who created Great Expectations video dating service. He was Gil's franchisor. So when I stumbled into Gil's office in 1990, Gil had just opened up the St. Louis Great Expectations, and a year later, he and his partners would open up Kansas City. And who is the franchisor? Who is the Papa Bear? Who is the guy who had the guts to try to bring video dating to the world of dating? Thank you for doing that, Jeffrey Ullman.
My pleasure. Boy, I must be the progenitor or sperm, so to speak, metaphorically, of course, to more marriages and dates than anybody else prior to the internet. Or even a couple, let's say till 2003-ish or so, when they had been established, eHarmony, JDate, Match.com, and dozens of others.
I've been proud of the number, which now is 1,400. That's the number of success story couples that I know about that have been happening under my umbrella, which includes all of what Gil did when he was your franchisee. And how many, you tracked them very carefully. How many
We did.
marriages do you know about?
At that time, in January 1995, we had almost 5,000 couples. So that's about 10,000 people. And then after that, I don't know.
I'm curious about the early days, okay? Because the idea for video dating, no surprise, you had studied film and video and all this, so you were on top of that element, but your mom had something to do with it. How did Great Expectations start from the very beginning?
I was 25 years old in 1975, so now you can kind of figure out how old I am. When I had the idea of video dating, I didn't have a name for it. My background was in what we would call today progressive politics or liberal politics. And the way I thought of, I was a journalism graduate from the University of California at Berkeley, having been at, for 2.5 years, USC, University of Southern Conservatism, or Southern California, whatever. I went there, USC, to change the world, because that's where Nixon's, plumbers were, and his breakers of laws, ethical and legal. And I was highly successful there. Won't get into that now. That's a whole nother series of podcasts. But I went to Berkeley because I was just another one of the people who was outspoken, and I wanted to test whether or not my ideals were egotistic, centered around me. What feels good for me? What should I do for me, etc., versus helping others. So I went there to Berkeley to test my integrity. Glad to tell you that I passed. I exceeded my own great expectations. And no, I didn't think of the name back then because I was 21-year-old. And when you're 21 years old, you don't think of dating or going out. You just don't. Certainly not back then in 1971, 72. You think of having sex, of just going out on a date, but not being in the dating world, so to speak. This is the camera that I first used to record people, and it recorded on this, oh boy, this 1/2-inch reel-to-reel tape, black and white only.
So
not
your
cassette.
early Great Expectations members were being filmed with something like that?
Yes, and notice the word you use, which is a common mistake, but it's like calling marijuana, cannabis marijuana. It's really cannabis, but people call it marijuana, et cetera. So this was not filmed. That's a wholly different technology. This is video, electronic, not it's digital. It's not analog. It's not
Uh-huh.
tape.
Okay.
But you can use it again. I'm not offended by it, and most people, use that. So um, my parents gave this to me as a graduation gift from Berkeley in 1972, and I had uh, you've heard of wine and cheese parties, or at least back then. We had a rice wine and cheese because rice was the big, bowl of rice was kind of like the big thing at Berkeley and other liberal colleges. And so I had about 20 people come over, and nobody had even heard of portable video. Nobody back in 71, no, 72, excuse me. And so while we got high or got silly on alcohol, we passed around the camera, and people would, shoot it into the monitor and get that feedback effect, and it was visually dazzling. Anyway, so the next day, a friend of mine who was a filmmaker in 16 millimeter at the time came over because he couldn't be there at the party. And in watching this again, it's black and white. He said, "Hey, who's that?" So I stopped it, rolled it back, freeze framed it, and of course it wasn't distinctly clear because the technology was nowhere near as we take it for granted today. And I said her name was whatever it was. I'd like to meet her. I said, a friend brought her over. I'll call the friend. Again, no emails, no texts. Uh, and so I got her full name and contact number and put them in touch. And they dated. And the last I heard, they moved out of state of California and got married. But I lost all further follow up. And I didn't think of its relevance because I wanted to change the world politically, economically, et cetera. And so again, dating was, or matchmaking wasn't remotely part of my thinking or visions. Um, but then fast forward 3 more years to the autumn of 1975, and we had a family dinner party, about 10 of us. And one of the us was my female cousin, a female cousin of mine, who was complaining that all the men she was meeting back in 1975, all they wanted to do was, that instead of putting a ring on the finger, metal on the finger. And that was the disco era, and it was the looking across the room and getting somebody's attention, and then going outside somewhere, car or whatnot, and locking loins, exchanging body fluids, not even caring to know a last name or a phone number, nor, of course, an email, which didn't exist. And so I remember everybody at the dinner table said, "Well, let me introduce you to," or "Go to a Jewish temple dance," or that kind of stuff. And no, 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 she said, she waved all that. I've tried it. Nobody really, all the good ones are taken. They're married or something, or they're gay. The good ones. And so I remember standing up and pointing at her with a kind of a humorous but bombastic style, which I'm a little known for, good or bad, and said, "Well, then, damn it, why don't you advertise yourself? Why don't you put yourself on TV?" And that nanosecond recoiled me back 3 years to that rice, wine, and cheese party where I had introduced some people, a couple, and the idea then that was the idea. And I knew that I had to create a different language, a different way of phrasing, constructing, communicating who we were, why a good person like you should come to a place like us, how can anybody wonderful find you if you won't or can't put yourself out there. So if you're a single parent, and you have to work and or you smoke, even back then, or you live a few miles out of town, those are negative factors. You're not, because especially if there's other fish to catch, so to speak. Um, so I called them members who bought a membership at a center, and I capitalized everything. Again, these are small little
I
tiddly
remember
things.
every bit of it. You were meticulous about
I
the way
was
we speak.
meticulous.
But I've carried that on, Jeffrey, not as anal as you, by the way,
No,
but
thank
I
you.
will tell you that I
I've been
choose.
called worse with the A words, but that's
I know
okay.
you have. I know all about you.
Yeah,
Everybody I know who knows Jeffrey Ullman has a Jeffrey Ullman story.
only one?
They might have more, but when they
I'll
tell
make
me
up more for them.
when people tell me they know you, I say, "Okay, stop there. Stop right there. Give me your Jeffrey Ullman story." Like, when they'll tell me these funny, wild stories and these crazy things. So anyway, I love how you put the company together to begin with. Jeffrey Ullman, the guy who created Great Expectations,
Um,
a zillion couples got together, got married, fell in love. Fast forward to today, 2024, the way dating is done today, the way the dating industry is. What do you have to say about all of that?
You met through Great Expectations only when there was mutual consent. When, regardless of whether the woman initiated the introduction or the man, um, everybody was treated the same. Everybody across the board was, or almost across the board, paid the same amount of money, which got as high as about in today's dollars, about close to $4,000, between 3,500 and
In
4,000.
1990 through about 98, we were up to maybe five or $6,000, but we weren't doing
Wow.
$10,000 programs, or 25 or 50 like we hear today, or 150. There's a
Whoa.
300,000, and there's somebody charging $1 million for matchmaking.
I'll
Again,
marry them,
what you
even though
get
I'm
with
married, or my wife will marry them.
what you did with Great Expectations was you made inventory available to people, and you also kept it kind of behind lock and key. If you weren't a member,
Yeah.
also, if you didn't have skin in the game, you didn't get to play. You didn't
Yeah,
get to.
that's a good term, skin in the game. That's true. We also had a program called For Your Eyes Only.
Oh, I
We
was in
didn't-
For Your Eyes Only.
Well,
Yeah,
it came
totally.
in out of Los Angeles, our Westwood Premier Membership Center,
Yeah.
because we had a lot of presidents of motion picture and television studios, and we had um, some number one or number one musicians who you would know. For example, somebody from the Doors, and no, it wasn't Jim Morrison because he was dead.
Uh-huh.
We
But I
had
know that.
several other TV stars, and so nobody would, and they didn't want to date anybody like them, in the entertainment industry. They wanted to meet a real person. Well,
Right.
are they not a real person? Anyway, so their video, their profile, their photos, their everything was so the photos, you could supply us with any photos you wanted, multiple, but we had to take a professional photo of you, of your full body. I mean, you could look to the side, you could look straight on, as well as having a head and shoulders shot, so somebody could see what you're like. Now, I remember I did over 5,000 videos myself. I mean, and they were not interviews; they were conversations, and we hid the camera and the mic. Now, we didn't really hide it. It wasn't like looking everywhere and you just couldn't find it. It was right over the shoulder. There was a plant kind of over it, like a golden pothos, indoor plants, but very fluffy and thick and leafy. And the mic was, hidden, not a problem. And the mic from the person who was doing the not interview but asking the questions did not have a mic, but we could hear the person because the focus was always on the person. And what we did was we had a remote control button, and we said, "Look, we're gonna start talking. I'll ask you some questions and just get the conversation going. At a time when you're relaxed, I'll press this button." We had a phony button, so we could hold it up. It wasn't connected to anything. There's no such thing as Bluetooth back then. Um, so we would almost always click the real record button in the first 30 seconds. And it would always be in the middle of the person, the member, not the person doing the question, but the member themselves telling some story that they were exuberant about or happy. They loved teaching. They loved playing with their kid. They loved playing professional football back in the day. They loved being charitable, whatever it was. They loved telling a joke. And so the greatest compliment that we could have given to the technology is someone watching, as they're doing now, watching this video um, and talking to it as if that person was right in front of them in real time. And uh, by absolute coincidence, when the director of and the producer of the Lou Grant show on CBS, which was like in the top 5, along with 60 Minutes and all that, came to do a production evaluation because we were maybe 3 or 4 miles from 20th Century Fox Studios. And we were walking, he and his crew of about, I don't know, 6 or 8, I guess, maybe more, were walking behind some of the members who were watching. I think we had like 20 or 25 different booths because it got very busy because we had active singles membership. We all heard this man talking a little bit loud, but enthusiastically, almost seductively, not sex, but just flirting like that with what he was watching. And then he caught himself. And I remember because I'm tall and I could see over it. And he didn't know anybody else was watching, but here he was talking to a TV, and it's not as if you allow for live questions on this webinar or podcast. It was different. So that was the greatest compliment to the technology and to the skill of our member services staff who could bring out the real personality and chemistry.
You've been married 3 times. This third one's been a really wonderful one. How did you and Cindy meet?
People, I was on my way to Las Vegas from Los Angeles, and it was in the desert, and there was a beat up gas station. I had to use the men's room, and there was filth everywhere. But on the wall, it said, "For a really good time, call Cindy." And I'd look for, I'm a troublemaker, or as my mom would say, a cockstuffler, which is a German or Yiddish word for mixing spoon, somebody who, kind of a practical joker, they mix it up. Anyway, then I say, no, we were introduced by a good friend of mine, a single dad, who also had 2 kids. I had 2 kids. We were both had recently gone through a divorce, not to each other, of course, lived about a mile from each other. And so we helped each other go through our divorces in the mid 30s. He was a very accomplished trial lawyer in Los Angeles. Anyway, he had dated this woman, Cindy, before for a long time. And then they realized they're good friends. And as my wife said, fuck buddies, which I thought was a little outrageous when she first told me that. I felt a combination of jealous and why am I attracted to this woman who spoke like I would speak, like a guy speak, but she was sexy as hell and huge hair, head of hair and whatnot. So we met in his kitchen, in my friend David's kitchen. And when I looked at her, I was awestruck, dumbstruck. Big head of hair, big eyes, hazel, no, green eyes, athletic build, flat chested. And to me, that was not a date killer, but we guys were looking in the 30s. Let's be honest, we paid a lot of attention to that. Women did too, not of breasts, of course, but other physical elements. And I was in deep like right away. First dinner was for me spaghetti because I just thought. Then after I ordered it, I thought, oh, I'm going to make a big mess and that's going to turn her off. But I don't think I ate more than 4 or 5 strands or noodles because I just was so into it. We are leaning. Look, if somebody's leaning back, well, that looks something weird. If somebody's leaning back in their chair on a date, or like this, it's not going so well. But if they're leaning forward and eyes open and smiles, and no, no matter who would walk by, you would not look at them. In fact,
Right.
here's a hint to anybody going out on a first date. If you really want to succeed for whatever reason, even if it's short term, you find a place where you can sit, where your date, if you will, uh, or the person you're with, can see that and knows that you can see everybody who's coming in and out of the restaurant or the bar or the club or whatnot. And what you don't do is ever look away. You look straight at the person in their eyes, lean forward, big eyes, don't cross this, and ask questions about, oh, that's great, or whatever it is. I like that. Tell me more about that. In other words, not yes or no questions, but show where you're showing interest. So when I did that, I almost got laid every single time because the person felt,
You're
God, this guy is
you're the
really
one who
into
taught
me.
Gil Ferman that trick. Yeah, just be
Yeah, well,
real interested and ask a lot of questions, and then,
but I was always sincere.
So it
The
sounds like you and Cindy met through somebody that she
Yeah,
knew.
it was not really a blind date because we realized that, hey, we had gone to dinner 2 years before at the neighborhood's annual rodeo day, I think it was called. And I had I was married, and she was recently divorced or divorcing at that time. And so the four of us were having dinner amidst, hundreds of other people. And she and I just hit it off. I wasn't in the least bit interested in her romantically, sexually, or anything. I thought, happily married. Little did I know, or didn't know. Um, and so we do something called ABCs, romantic ABCs. Always be courting, always be curious. Because when you're with somebody, the sex wears off in a way. You've heard the stories, you've met the in-laws and the best friends and the this and the work people. So you think you know the person well enough, and you probably do. But if you don't show encouragement and excitement, I don't mean constant, but if you don't show a commitment to wanting to know even more, as much as I know and like or didn't like or don't like, I want to know more about you.
That's
And
beautiful.
that's what we do. We was you know Single people, well, or people spend the most amount of money getting, as a single person looking for the right person. And then of course there's the marriage, the engagement or the marriage for whatever period of, and then there's another huge cost, which is getting out of the marriage. So people spend a lot of money getting in and getting out of the marriage, but they don't spend the money or the curiosity or the commitment or the best behavior. Like it's okay to fart in front of your wife. Yeah, of course things happen, even from her. First time I heard my wife, Cindy, poop, or even just cut one loose. I thought I was a ventriloquist and threw that fart sound across the room,
So
you know.
funny.
So, and you have
So
to know when to reveal certain elements of intimacy that you've lived with, good or
there's
bad, for anybody.
there's one more thing I want to know about your relationship with Cindy. You know a lot of women. You've met a lot of women. You've been married to two other women. What is it about Cindy? What was it and what is it about Cindy that's special and different? Because she lasted 30 years. I mean, that's a long time.
She's going to last another 30, but here's the problem. In 2011, um, which was about 14 years ago, 13, 14, um, she was diagnosed with having stage 1A breast cancer. So since her older sister died of breast cancer, albeit a different one, she lopped them off and reconstructed. That was fun saying, "What do you want? A B, a C?" I said, "My name is Jeff, so let's have a double J." No, we didn't go anywhere near that. Um, and then in 2016, she was diagnosed with metastatic stage 4 cancer. Even though she was seeing her oncologist every 6 months, taking the medicines every day, um, staying in touch, and bringing to the attention of the oncologist her family history even more. They were incompetent. And they were like, I should have sued them, but I didn't want to add malpractice stress to Cindy. I didn't want to do that when you're fighting for your life. And then, but we got it under control because of my two entrepreneurial businesses at the time, Only You Genetics and forget the other one. Anyway, it identified the medical treatments that could work and that doctors, even the conservative ones, would agree were good diagnostic tools. But kind of by accident, this year, 2024, we learned through a scan, which is more reliable than a blood test, less reliable than a biopsy, but that ultimately we did do a biopsy, that she had what's called diffuse large B cell non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So it's a blood cancer. So your blood goes everywhere. So it's metastatic. So it can take the killing, the terminal cancer cells all over your body. And here she was at age 66 at the time, um, uh, not freaking out, but why me? How did this happen? Well, none of that changed my love for her or affection. She's my hero. I want to call it heroine, but it sounds like
Heroin.
heroin, they're spelled differently. It's like, she's the strongest person I know. And I know a lot of really strong people, strong for good reason. I don't mean so much, lift the world atlas strong, but emotionally, intellectually, financially, whatnot. Well, not so much financially, emotionally, psychologically. She's completely bald. And you wouldn't say, okay, so you lose your hair, you put a hat, you buy a wig. But when you lose your eyebrows and lose your eyelids, and your public hair is gone, your pubic hair is gone, silly little L separates it. Um, and you grew up in Beverly Hills, which is where she grew most of her life. Uh, things change,
Yeah.
and you really, and I vocalize this. Meaning I verbalize it with it, saying different things. But now that you're not the way you used to look, I mean, how else you can say it? You're not going to say, "Gee, now that you're ugly." Or now that, I used to fall in love with your hair because she had this lioness hair, was just gorgeous. And she had some gray and she had some wrinkles. Look, when you're in your 60s, you have that unless you're from Beverly Thrill and constantly updating yourself, et cetera, et cetera. But you're so much more beautiful. Um, and we still have sex regularly. I mean, we don't have to schedule. We kind of schedule it every once in a while. Every couple has their own words or word or music or habit or reference to some humor that, hey, let's have some sex or some fun or do a horizontal trampoline or whatever you say. I mean, I've heard so many things, and said so many things. So we keep it interesting. Again, romantic ABCs always be courting. People don't use the word courting, but it's in a form a way of seduction, but more than that, it's a way of keeping a relationship, a romantic relationship, exciting and fresh when you think you know it all. And it's a way of not taking for granted the person. If you take people for granted and you want something sincere and deep and meaningful from them or with them, you damn well not you better not rely on these bad habits of thinking only of your own self. It's kind of like deposits and withdrawals. A withdrawal is when you ask somebody to do something, a favor, loan you some money, babysit, whatever. And a deposit is when you, not in a tit for tat way, you do something, even not calling attention to it. Like, honey, I took out the trash. Well, of course you take it. That's your job around here, among other things. Or I made the bed, or I made dinner for you, or whatever. You don't need to call attention to that. The other person knows, or if they don't know, something deeper is wrong that needs to be, adjusted in some way. Words are hard and they're memorable. And I grew up in the 50s and 60s with my parents saying, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you. Wrong. You heal from a broken bone, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't really heal from some verbal abuse. And it's been documented um, very many times that for every time somebody interprets what you say or what you did in a negative way. They interpret it, not you. You need 7 counterbalances from their point of view just to get back to normal.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you can't rush it. You can't do all those 7 things or 8 or 10 things in 1 day or 1 week or 1 month because that's not going to look sincere. It's not going to be sincere.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I am not dating. I'm glad I don't have to bring children into the world because it's a badass world now. Now, odd that I say that because one of my 6 adult sons just had their second kid this very morning. And I
Well,
am, here's that Yiddish word, kvelling,
oh,
brimming with joy. Love it. He married up.
congratulations.
He
That's
knows it.
beautiful.
She's a
I'm so
wonderful girl, woman, lady. They have a 2-year-old
Is this
already.
Drew?
And this is Drew, Andrew.
Oh,
But
amazing.
oh yeah,
Amazing. Oh, I'm
he's
so
terrific. Yes. Um,
Jeffrey, I want to thank you for being here on the show and giving us so much insight. We're going to have fun editing this because you're very special.
oh,
And
thank you.
I ran out of time, but I'm really, really happy that you did this with me. Thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and for getting to know who my good friend Jeffrey Ullman is. Until we meet again, you go out there and
Yes.
transform me to we for yourselves.